Dear listener, welcome once more to the Hercule Poirot Story Podcast, where the little gray cells awaken to unravel the most perplexing enigmas of the human soul. Tonight, we transport you to the misty vales of Blackthorn Village, a quaint hamlet nestled in the rolling hills of rural England in the year 1925. A time when the echoes of the Great War still lingered in the hearts of men, and the veneer of civility concealed depths of passion and deceit. Chapter 1. The Shadow over Langford Manor. In the waning light of a September afternoon in 1925, Langford Manor stood as a monument to an era of opulence now tinged with the melancholy of inevitable decline. Nestled in the verdant embrace of Blackthorn Village, a sleepy hamlet in the heart of rural England, the manor's ivy-clad walls rose like a silent sentinel against the rolling hills. Its mullioned windows, glinting faintly under the gathering dusk, seemed to watch the world with a weary omniscience, as if privy to secrets too burdensome to voice. The air was heavy with the scent of damp earth and fading roses, and a restless wind stirred the ancient oaks that flanked the estate, their gnarled branches whispering tales of forgotten summers. Overhead, storm clouds amassed, their brooding presence promising a deluge that might cleanse, or perhaps merely expose, the sins concealed within the manor's hallowed halls. Blackthorn Village, with its cobblestone lanes and thatched cottages, exuded a deceptive tranquility, a veneer of pastoral serenity that belied the undercurrents of human passion and duplicity. The manor itself, a sprawling edifice of gray stone and timber, had been the seat of the Langford family for 3 generations, its grandeur a testament to the industrial triumphs of its current master, Mr. Victor Langford. At 52, Victor was a man of imposing presence, his broad shoulders and stern countenance reflecting a life forged in the crucible of Birmingham's steel mills. His hair, once jet black, was now streaked with silver, and his deep-set eyes, perpetually narrowed, this vigilance had sculpted his life into one of isolation, where every smile was scrutinized, every gesture weighed for hidden intent. His motive, if one could call it that, was survival in a world he perceived as perpetually hostile, a world where loyalty was a currency more precious than gold. Within the manor's labyrinthine corridors, other figures moved, each a thread in the intricate tapestry of intrigue that would soon unravel. Chief among them was Mrs. Beatrice Langford, Victor's wife of 20 years, a woman of 40, whose delicate beauty belied a soul tempered by quiet endurance. Beatrice, with her auburn hair pinned neatly beneath a lace cap, and her emerald eyes veiled by a perpetual air of resignation, glided through the kitchen with the grace of a ghost. Her apron, pristine as fresh linen, was a symbol of her role, dutiful, subservient, yet concealing depths of unspoken resentment. Psychologically, Beatrice was a study in contrasts. Outwardly composed, her hands steady as she sliced apples for a tart, yet inwardly a maelstrom of suppressed emotions. Her marriage to Victor had long since withered, its early blooms of affection trampled by his domineering nature. If one were to speculate on her motive, it might be liberation, a desperate yearning to break free from the invisible chains of a loveless union, where her every breath was measured against her husband's expectations. The household was a microcosm of conflicting desires, each inhabitant a potential player in the drama about to unfold. Reginald Langford, the couple's only son and heir, was a lanky youth of 25, his tousled blonde hair and perpetual sneer marking him as a creature of indolence and ambition. Lounging in the library, a glass of brandy dangling from his fingers, He leafed through a racing form with feigned interest, his mind adrift on dreams of inheritance. Reginald's psychology was that of the prodigal son, impatient, entitled, driven by a covetous hunger for his father's fortune to fund his dissipated lifestyle in London's gaming houses. His sharp blue eyes, inherited from his mother, flickered with a restless energy, a mask for a soul driven by financial revenge. His motive was rooted in the thousands he believed Victor had cheated him of, a sum that could restore his faltering enterprises. His fingers, stained with ink, trembled slightly as he turned a page, betraying an anxiety that no amount of feigned camaraderie could conceal. The maid, Eliza Croft, was a wiry spinster of 38, her sharp features and mousy hair rendering her nearly invisible as she flitted about the manor's corridors. Her plain gray dress and starched apron were as unassuming as her demeanor, yet her dark eyes, darting like those of a cornered animal, missed nothing. Eliza's psychology was a cauldron of suppressed rage, born from years of menial servitude under Victor's acerbic tongue. Rumors whispered of a past humiliation, a rebuffed advance perhaps, or a slight that festered like a wound. Her motive, if one existed, might be vengeance, a desire to reclaim her dignity from a master who treated her as less than human. As she dusted a gilt-framed mirror, her reflection seemed to mock her, a reminder of a life spent in the margins. Tom Wilkins, the gardener, was a burly man of 42, his weathered skin and calloused hands testifying to a life of toil under the open sky. Clad in a rough tweed jacket, he tended the manor's grounds with stoic diligence, his broad shoulders bent over rose beds as the wind tugged at his cap. Tom's psychology was that of a man tethered to the earth, yet burning with a simmering passion. Village gossip hinted at stolen glances toward Beatrice, their eyes meeting across the garden in moments of unspoken longing. His motive, if one were to speculate, could be a jealous love or a protective fury, a desire to shield Beatrice from Victor's cruelty, or perhaps to possess what he could never claim. As he sharpened his shears, the metallic rasp echoed like a prelude to violence. Finally, Mrs. Agnes Potter, the cook, ruled the kitchen with the authority of a general. A plump matron of 55, her kitchen paused mid-motion, her knife hovering over a loaf of bread. A flicker of something, anger, fear, or perhaps resolve, passed across her face before she resumed her task, her hands steady but her heart racing. Outside, the wind howled, rattling the windows and driving leaves against the panes like the patter of guilty footsteps. The storm clouds, now a menacing slate, loomed closer, their shadows creeping across the lawns. In the library, Reginald tossed aside his racing form, his fingers drumming impatiently. Grimes, in the study, closed his ledger with a snap, his lips pursed in thought. Eliza, polishing silver in the dining room, froze as a distant creak echoed from the corridor. Tom, in the garden, glanced toward the manor's windows, his grip tightening on his shears. Agnes, stirring her stew, muttered a prayer under her breath, as if warding off an unseen threat. The stage was set, the players assembled, each with their secrets and desires woven into the fabric of Langford Manor. Unbeknownst to them, the threads of fate were tightening, drawing them inexorably toward a tragedy that would summon the keenest mind in England, Hercule Poirot, to unravel the mystery of the widow's blood-stained apron. As the clock's final chime faded, a shadow passed across the study window, fleeting and ominous, a harbinger of the violence to come. Chapter 2. The Fatal Repast. The kitchen of Langford Manor, a sanctum of warmth and industry, stood in stark contrast to the brooding chill that enveloped the estate as the September afternoon deepened into twilight. Its stone-flagged floor, worn smooth by generations of bustling feet, gleamed under the glow of oil lamps, their light casting flickering shadows across the oak-beamed ceiling. The air was redolent with the comforting aromas of freshly baked scones, simmering Darjeeling tea, and the faint tang of lemon zest, a deceptive veneer of domestic tranquility that belied the undercurrent of tension weaving through the household. The great hearth roared, its flames licking at logs contemplating a critical move. Beatrice's psychology, as ever, was a labyrinth of suppressed emotions, a woman whose outward serenity masked a soul battered by years of Victor Langford's domineering presence. Her fingers lingered on the teapot's handle, as if reluctant to release it into the world, where it would soon play its part in the unfolding tragedy. Beyond the kitchen's warmth, the manor thrummed with the subtle discord of its inhabitants, each caught in their own web of motives and secrets. In the library, Reginald Langford sprawled across a leather armchair, his lanky frame draped in a tailored suit now rumpled from indolence. The racing form he had been studying lay discarded on the floor, replaced by a crystal tumbler of brandy that glinted in the firelight. His blonde hair, tousled and unkempt, framed a face twisted into a sneer, his blue eyes darting toward the door as if expecting an unwelcome intrusion. Reginald's mind was a storm of impatience and entitlement, his thoughts fixed on the fortune that stood between him and his father's iron grip. His motive, greed, pure and unadulterated, burned within him, fueled by gambling debts and a lifestyle that demanded far more than his allowance provided. As he sipped his brandy, his lips curled into a grimace, as if the very taste of the liquor reminded him of his dependence on Victor's largesse. In the study, Mr. Harold Grimes hunched over a ledger, his portly frame straining the seams of his tweed suit. His spectacles glinted as he scribbled notes, his florid cheeks flushed with the heat of the room, or perhaps the weight of his grievances. Grimes, ever the opportunist, concealed his true intentions behind a facade of geniality, but his beady eyes betrayed a calculating mind, one that had long tallied the slights and financial losses inflicted by Victor's ruthless business dealings. His motive was revenge, cloaked in the guise of partnership, a desire to reclaim the thousands he believed. At the door she paused, her ears catching the faint murmur of voices within, her expression unreadable. Outside, in the garden, Tom Wilkins knelt beside a rosebed, his burly frame dwarfed by the towering yews that lined the manor's grounds. His weathered hands, calloused from years of toil, wielded a pair of shears with practiced ease, the metallic rasp echoing in the gathering dusk. Clad in a rough tweed jacket, Tom's weathered face was set in a mask of stoic concentration, but his eyes, deep brown and soulful, darted toward the manor's windows, where Beatrice's silhouette occasionally appeared. His psychology was that of a man tethered to the earth, yet burning with unspoken passion, his heart stirred by a forbidden affection for the mistress of the house. Village gossip whispered of stolen glances, of moments when their eyes met across the garden, kindling a spark that could ignite into something dangerous. Tom's motive, if he harbored one, might be a jealous love or a protective fury, a desire to shield Beatrice from Victor's cruelty, or to claim her for himself. As he sharpened his shears, the sound seemed to carry a note of menace, a prelude to the violence that loomed. Mrs. Agnes Potter, the cook, presided over the kitchen's domain with the authority of a matron, her plump figure bustling between stove and table. Her rosy cheeks glowed in the hearth's warmth, and her gray hair, tucked beneath a mob cap, framed a face that radiated practicality. Yet beneath her no-nonsense exterior lay a pragmatic soul, one that had weathered life's storms with resilience. Agnes's psychology concealed a secret, a debt perhaps, or a family scandal that Victor's knowledge threatened to expose. Her motive, if it existed, was self-preservation, a need to protect her reputation, or her son's future from the ruin Victor could wield with a single word. As she stirred a pot of stew, her eyes narrowed, as if peering into a future fraught with uncertainty. The manor's clock struck 5, its chimes reverberating through the halls like a tolling bell, summoning the household to their respective roles in the drama about to unfold. Voice laced with barely concealed venom. "You hoard your wealth like a miser. Release it, or I shall take matters into my own hands." The words hung in the air, a red herring of filial discord that would later cloud the investigation. Victor's face darkened, his voice a low growl. "You'll get nothing until I'm dead, boy." The exchange was brief but electric, charged with the weight of years of resentment. Meanwhile, in the garden, Tom Wilkins paused, his shears still, his eyes fixed on the study window where Victor's silhouette loomed. Eliza, passing through the corridor, overheard a murmured exchange between Grimes and Agnes in the pantry. Innocent chatter, or a conspiracy cloaked in banalities. The timeline of that fateful afternoon would prove crucial. At 5:15, Beatrice left the kitchen, her tray delivered. At 5:20, a muffled cry echoed from the study, sharp and fleeting, swallowed by the wind. No one admitted to hearing it, yet the manor seemed to hold its breath, as if aware of the catastrophe unfolding within its walls. By 5:30 the storm broke, rain lashing the windows as Beatrice returned to the study with a plate of biscuits. Her scream shattered the silence, a piercing wail that drew the household like moths to a flame. Victor Langford lay slumped over his desk, a dagger buried deep in his chest, its hilt gleaming in the lamplight. Blood pooled on the blotter, a crimson tide that stained the papers beneath. And Beatrice, in her horror, knelt beside him, her hands reaching instinctively to check for life. Her apron, once pristine, was now marred with his blood, a physical clue that would ignite suspicion and set the stage for Hercule Poirot's arrival. The murder was brutal, intimate, a stabbing that spoke of raw emotion, of a passion unleashed in a moment of uncontrolled fury. As the household gathered, their faces a gallery of shock, fear, and perhaps guilt. The manor's walls seemed to close in, guarding the secrets of the fatal repast. Chapter 3. The arrival of the little bell. Nature itself demanded justice for the blood spilled within the manor's hallowed halls. The local constabulary, led by the resolute Inspector Japp, descended upon Langford Manor with the efficiency of a well-drilled regiment. Japp, a bluff Scotsman of 45, with a ruddy complexion and a bristling mustache, was a man of unwavering diligence. his broad frame clad in a sensible overcoat that repelled the rain. His blue eyes, sharp despite the fatigue of a long career, surveyed the scene with a practiced air. Yet his furrowed brow betrayed the complexity of the task before him. Psychologically, Jap was a man of action, driven by a dogged determination to uphold the law, yet tempered by a grudging respect for the subtleties of human nature. A respect that had led him, more than once, to seek the aid of a certain diminutive Belgian detective. As his men cordoned off the study, their lanterns casting eerie shadows across the blood-stained blotter, Jap muttered to himself, "This is no simple affair. Too many threads, too many shadows." The dagger, still embedded in Victor's chest, gleamed accusingly, and the widow's blood-stained apron, now draped over a chair, seemed to mock his efforts to unravel the truth. The crime scene was a tableau of chaos and precision. Victor Langford's body, slumped over his desk, bore the marks of a violent struggle. His right hand clutching a crumpled letter, its contents illegible beneath the crimson stain. The study, a bastion of masculine authority with its leather-bound books and heavy oak furniture, was disturbed by subtle clues. A muddy footprint on the carpet, its edges blurred by the tread of heavy boots. A torn scrap of fabric, blue and coarse, caught on the jagged edge of the desk. And a faint smear of blood on the doorframe, suggesting the killer's hasty retreat. Jap's initial inquiries revealed a household rife with tension, each member's alibi riddled with inconsistencies that only deepened the mystery. Beatrice claimed she had been in the kitchen until 5:15, yet no one could corroborate her presence. Tailored to perfection, repelled the rain as effectively as his mind repelled disorder. Psychologically, Poirot was a paragon of order, his little gray cells a symphony of logic and intuition, driven by an unyielding pursuit of truth amid the chaos of human frailty. His love of symmetry extended beyond his appearance to his methodology, where every clue, no matter how trivial, was a piece in the puzzle of justice. "Mon ami Jap," Poirot greeted with a precise bow, his Belgian accent lending a musical cadence to his words. "It is the affair most intriguing, is it not? A widow's apron stained with blood. Ah, but is it the mark of guilt or merely misfortune?" Jap, relieved at his arrival, ushered him toward the manor, his lantern cutting through the mist as they traversed the sodden lawns. "It's a devil of a case, Poirot," Jap confessed, his voice gruff. "The man's been stabbed, right in his own study, and every soul in the house has a reason to want him dead. The widow's apron is the talk of the village, but there's more to it. Footprints, fabric, and alibis that don't hold water." Poirot's eyes twinkled with anticipation, his mustaches twitching as he absorbed the details. Bon, he murmured. "The little gray cells, they begin to stir. Let us see this stage of tragedy." Upon entering the study, Poirot's gaze swept the room with the precision of a jeweler inspecting a flawed gem. The muddy footprint, partially obscured by the carpet's pile, suggested a heavy tread, perhaps that of a man, though Poirot noted its edges were deliberately smudged, as if to obscure the boot's size. The scrap of fabric, coarse and blue, hinted at a working-class garment, yet its placement seemed too convenient. A possible red herring planted to mislead. The blood smear on the doorframe, faint but deliberate, suggested the killer had brushed against it in haste, perhaps unaware of the mark left behind. Poirot knelt beside the body, his gloved fingers tracing the air above the dagger's hilt. careful not to disturb the moment. Tom Wilkins, the gardener, swore he was in the potting shed, but his tools bore traces of fresh mud, matching the study's footprint. Agnes Potter, the cook, claimed to have been in the kitchen, yet her timeline conflicted with Beatrice's account. Each alibi, Japp noted, was a thread in a tapestry of lies, each suspect a potential weaver of the crime. Poirot paced the study, his steps measured, his eyes darting from clue to clue. He paused by the desk where the crumpled letter in Victor's hand caught his attention. "This letter, it is significant," he said, his voice low. "The blood obscures the words, but the act of clutching it, say important. It may hold the key to the motive." He turned to the window, where the rain beat a relentless tattoo, and noted the view of the garden, where Tom's shed was just visible through the mist. "The footprints, they lead us to the garden, perhaps, but are they the path of the killer, or a deception to lead us astray?" His mind, already spinning with possibilities, catalogued each detail with the precision of a watchmaker. As the clock struck 7, its chimes muffled by the storm, Poirot turned to Japp with a serene smile. "The stage is set, mon ami, and the players are assembled. The apron, the footprints, the fabric, they are but the opening notes of a symphony. We must now interrogate, observe, and listen to the discord in their souls. The truth, it hides not in the blood, but in the silences." With that, he adjusted his coat and prepared to face the household, his little gray cells poised to unravel the mystery of the widow's blood-stained apron. The manor, its walls steeped in secrets, seemed to hold its breath, awaiting the Belgian's verdict. Chapter 4. Interrogations commence. The drawing room of Langford Manor, bathed in the amber flicker of a roaring log fire, stood as a bastion of Edwardian elegance, its polished mahogany panels and heavy velvet drapes absorbing the storm's relentless drumming against the windows, his gloved hands behind his back, exuding an air of serene authority. Psychologically, Poirot was a master of order, his little gray cells abhorring the chaos of human deceit, yet relishing the challenge of unraveling it. His method was not one of bluster or intimidation, but of psychological incision, probing the minds behind the facades to uncover the motives that simmered beneath. "Mes amis," he began, his Belgian accent lending a melodic cadence to his words. "We are gathered to seek the truth in the matter of Monsieur Victor Langford's murder. The little gray cells, they demand clarity, and so we shall proceed with method and precision." Inspector Japp, standing by the fireplace, his ruddy face etched with fatigue, nodded approvingly. His men had secured the manor, but the weight of the case pressed heavily upon him. The suspects, seated in a semicircle of high-backed chairs, formed a gallery of unease. Beatrice Langford, her delicate hands folded in her lap, her blood-stained apron now replaced with a somber black dress. Reginald Langford, slouched with a petulant sneer, his blonde hair disheveled. Harold Grimes, mopping his brow with a handkerchief, his spectacles glinting nervously. Eliza Croft, her sharp features taut, her mousy hair tucked beneath a cap. Tom Wilkins, his burly frame awkward in the refined setting, his calloused hands clasped tightly. And Agnes Potter, her rosy cheeks flushed, her eyes darting with suppressed agitation. Each bore the mark of suspicion, their alibis fragile as spun glass, their motives a tangle of greed, resentment, and hidden passions. Poirot began with Beatrice, his gaze softening as he addressed the widow. "Madame Langford," he said, his voice gentle yet probing. "Your apron, it is the talk of the village, stained with the blood of your husband. Why, I ask, did you approach the body so closely?" Beatrice, her porcelain features pale against her dark attire, lifted her emerald eyes, their depths clouded with sorrow. I sought to aid him, Monsieur Poirot. 5 o'clock. Heated words about money, oui. Yet you claim to have left for the village pub at 5:15. There are witnesses, perhaps, but the timeline, it is, how you say, slippery. Reginald shifted in his seat, his blue eyes narrowing. "I was at the Blackthorn Inn, Poirot. Ask anyone there. Father was a tyrant, hoarding his wealth while I scraped by, but I didn't kill him." His voice carried a defiant edge, yet his fingers drummed nervously on the armrest, betraying his unease. Psychologically, Reginald was a creature of impatience, his entitlement fueled by a hunger for his father's fortune. The muddy footprint in the study, partially matching the tread of his boots, suggested involvement, yet its smudged edges hinted at tampering. A red herring, perhaps, to divert suspicion. Poirot noted the discrepancy in the timeline. Reginald's departure at 5:15 left a narrow window for murder, yet the pub was a 10-minute walk, and no one had yet confirmed his arrival. Harold Grimes was next, his florid complexion glistening with sweat as he adjusted his spectacles. "Monsieur Grimes," Poirot said, his voice deceptively mild. "You claim a business meeting in the village at the time of the murder. Yet your manner, it is, most agitated. Your partnership with Monsieur Langford, it was not without its, comment dit-on, frictions." Grimes cleared his throat, his handkerchief twisting in his hands. "Victor owed me thousands, it's true," he admitted, his voice strained. "We had disputes, but I'd not kill for it. I was at the inn, discussing contracts with a supplier. Ask him." His shifty gaze and rapid breathing suggested deceit, a man whose genial facade concealed a motive of financial revenge. Poirot's mind catalogued the possibility of a forged document, perhaps hidden among Grimes's ledgers, that could reveal the true extent of his grievances. The scrap of fabric in the study, blue and coarse, might point to a hired hand, or a deliberate misdirection by Grimes himself. Eliza Croft, the maid, sat rigid, her sharp features drawn tight as Poirot's gaze fell upon pebbles dropped into a still pond, their ripples disturbing the surface of each suspect's composure. Tom Wilkins, the gardener, met Poirot's gaze with a steady intensity, his burly frame seeming out of place among the room's finery. "Monsieur Wilkins," Poirot said, "you were in the potting shed, oui? Yet the mud on your boots, it matches the footprint in the study. And your eyes, they linger often on Madame Langford." Tom's weathered face flushed, his calloused hands clenching. "I was tending the roses, sir, all afternoon. I heard the scream from the shed. As for Mrs. Langford, I respect her, nothing more." His stoic demeanor masked a simmering passion, a motive of jealous love or protective fury that Poirot noted with interest. The bloodied rag in the shed, discovered earlier, might be a red herring, or a damning link to the crime. Agnes Potter, the cook, was the last to face Poirot's scrutiny. Her rosy cheeks glowed in the firelight, but her eyes held a guarded wariness. "Madame Potter," Poirot said, "you were in the kitchen preparing dinner, yet your timeline conflicts with Madame Langford's. And there is talk of a grudge, perhaps, against Monsieur Langford?" Agnes's hand smoothed her apron, a gesture of composure. I was stirring the stew, sir, when I heard the scream at 5:22. Victor dismissed my son from the mills unjustly. Yes, but I'd not harm him. Her pragmatic soul concealed a potential motive of family loyalty, a secret Victor might have threatened to expose. Poirot noted the arsenic in the pantry, unused but suggestive, a psychological clue to divert attention from the stabbing. As the interrogations concluded, Poirot paced the room, his mind a whirl of connections. "The clues, they are many," he murmured to Jap. "But the truth, it hides in the silences. The apron, the footprints, the fabric, they are but the surface. We must probe deeper, mon ami, into the hearts of these souls." Chapter 5. Shadows in the Garden. The rain-soaked grounds of Langford Manor, cloaked in the deepening twilight of that fateful September evening in 1925, seemed to pulse with an unspoken menace, as if the very earth conspired to guard the secrets of the murder within. The storm, unrelenting in its fury, had transformed the manicured lawns into a morass of mud, the once pristine paths now treacherous underfoot. The ancient oaks, their gnarled branches swaying in the gale, cast long, spectral shadows across the garden, where the air was heavy with the scent of wet earth and decaying leaves. The mist, thick as a shroud, clung to the hedgerows like the ghostly fingers of some unseen accuser, lending an eerie stillness to the scene despite the tempest's roar. Beyond the manor's ivy-clad walls, the distant spire of St. Mary's Church pierced the fog, a silent sentinel over Blackthorn village, where whispers of Victor Langford's murder continued to ripple through the cobblestoned lanes. Hercule Poirot, undaunted by the elements, ventured into this sodden wilderness, his patent leather shoes sinking slightly into the mire as he navigated the garden with the precision of a cat. His neat overcoat, buttoned tightly against the rain, and his immaculate bowler hat, tilted just so, gave him an air of incongruous elegance amid the chaos of nature. His piercing green eyes, ever alert, scanned the surroundings, missing nothing, not the churned earth near the rose beds, nor the faint glint of a discarded tool half buried in the mud. Psychologically, Poirot was a beacon of order, his little gray cells humming with the anticipation of discovery, each clue a note in the symphony of truth he sought to compose. The garden, he sensed, held secrets that the manor's polished interiors could not conceal, and it was here, among the shadows, that he would begin to unravel the tangled threads of motive and opportunity. Inspector Jap, trailing a step behind, clutched his lantern, its feeble light struggling against the mist. His ruddy face, damp with rain, was etched with thanks with frustration. His early stood within, his burly frame dwarfing the cramped space as he polished a pair of pruning shears with a rag. His weathered face, lined by years of toil, was set in a mask of stoic concentration, but his deep brown eyes met Poirot's with a steady intensity that hinted at depths unspoken. Tom's psychology was that of a man bound to the earth, his soul rooted in the rhythms of nature, yet stirred by a passion that flickered in his glances toward the manor's windows. Village gossip spoke of his unspoken affection for Beatrice Langford, a forbidden longing that could ignite into jealousy or protective fury. "Monsieur Wilkins," Poirot began, his tone deceptively mild, "you claim you were here, in this shed, when the scream was heard at 5:20, oui? Yet the mud on your boots, it matches the footprint in the study. And this rag, he gestured to a bloodied cloth tucked behind a sack of fertilizer. It is most curious, no? Tom's hands stilled, his grip tightening on the shears. I was here, sir, all afternoon, tending to my tools, he replied, his voice low and steady. Heard Mrs. Langford scream from here, I did. That rag, it's from pruning, not blood. Roses bleed red sap, you know. His explanation was plausible, yet his eyes darted briefly toward the manor, betraying a flicker of unease. Poirot noted the rag's crimson stain, its texture too viscous for sap, and filed it away as a potential clue, or a deliberate misdirection. Tom's motive, if he harbored one, could be rooted in his unspoken love for Beatrice, a desire to shield her from Victor's cruelty, or to claim her for himself. The muddy footprint, partially matching Tom's heavy boots, was a tantalizing link. Yet its smudged edges suggested tampering, a red herring to divert suspicion. Leaving the shed, Poirot traced the path toward the garden gate, his eyes scanning the ground for further clues. The rain had blitzed. Psychologically, Eliza was a cauldron of suppressed rage, her years of servitude under Victor's acerbic tongue fueling a bitterness that simmered beneath her servile facade. Her motive, if one existed, might be vengeance, a desire to reclaim her dignity from a master who treated her as less than human. Mademoiselle Croft, Poirot said, his voice soft but piercing. You claim to have been cleaning upstairs at 5:20, yet a housemaid saw you near the study. And the smear of blood on the doorframe. It is most suggestive, no? Eliza's eyes widened, her fingers clutching the polishing cloth. I was upstairs, sir, dusting the banisters, she insisted, her voice tight. Master was cruel, yes, but I'd not harm him. I heard nothing until Mrs. Langford's scream. Her alibi, like the others, was fragile, and Poirot noted a contradiction. A housemaid's testimony placed Eliza near the study at 5:20, close to the time of the muffled cry reported by a neighbor. The blood smear, faint but deliberate, suggested a hasty exit, perhaps by someone unaware of the mark they left. Eliza's agitation, her fidgeting hands, and her avoidance of Poirot's gaze hinted at a psychological clue. A woman whose composure was fraying under the weight of scrutiny. As Poirot moved through the manor, his mind wove the clues into a tapestry of possibilities. The timeline of the murder was tightening. Victor's death, per the coroner's initial report, occurred around 5:18. Based on the body's temperature and the blood's clotting, Beatrice had left the kitchen at 5:15, delivering the tea tray. The muffled cry was heard at 5:20, and Beatrice's scream came at 5:30, when she discovered the body. Yet, Agnes Potter, the cook, claimed to have heard the scream at 5:22, a discrepancy that gnawed at Poirot's sense of order. He sought her out in the kitchen, where she stirred a pot of stew with a vigor that seemed to mask her unease. Agnes, her rosy cheeks flushed, mentioned a figure fleeing through the garden gate around 5:20. A shadowy form, cloaked in the mist, that could be an outsider or a household member staging a deception. The torn scrap of fabric in the study, blue and coarse, might belong to such a figure. Yet its placement seemed too convenient, another misdirection in a case rife with them. Poirot's little gray cells buzzed with activity, each clue a puzzle piece that refused to fit neatly. The garden, it is the mirror of the soul, he murmured to Jap. "It hides, but it also reveals. We must look closer, mon ami, for the shadows hold the truth." As the rain battered the manor, the Belgian detective stood resolute, his mind poised to pierce the veil of mystery enveloping Langford Manor. Chapter 6. The Web of Motives Unravels. The storm that battered Langford Manor on that fateful September evening in 1925 showed no signs of abating, its relentless torrents transforming the grounds into a quagmire and lending an air of oppressive confinement to the grand estate. Within the manor's walls, the atmosphere was no less tumultuous, as the weight of Victor Langford's murder pressed upon the household like a physical force. The drawing room, where Hercule Poirot had conducted his initial interrogations, now lay silent, its fire reduced to glowing embers, casting flickering shadows that seemed to dance with the secrets of the inhabitants. The air was thick with the scent of damp wool and wood smoke, a stark contrast to the chill of suspicion that permeated every glance and gesture. The clock on the mantel, its hands creeping toward 9, ticked with a relentless precision, as if counting down to the moment when the truth would be laid bare. Hercule Poirot, his diminutive figure a beacon of calm amid the storm, paced the corridor outside the drawing room, his patent leather shoes silent on the polished floor. His egg-shaped head was tilted slightly, his piercing green eyes half closed in thought, his impeccable mustaches twitching as his little gray cells wove the threads of evidence into a tapestry of motive and opportunity. Psychologic of cards. Poirot's lips curved into a faint smile. "Mon ami, the shakiness, it is the key. The truth, it hides not in what they say, but in what they conceal. We must probe deeper into the silences of their souls." With that, he set out to pursue the threads of evidence that had emerged, determined to untangle the web of motives that bound the household. Poirot's first inquiry led him back to Beatrice Langford, whom he found in the library, seated by a window where the rain beat a relentless tattoo. Her delicate frame was swathed in a black shawl, her auburn hair catching the lamplight as she stared into the storm. Her emerald eyes, usually veiled by resignation, now held a flicker of defiance, as if the weight of suspicion had awakened a latent strength. Psychologically, Beatrice was a woman of quiet endurance, her years of submission to Victor's tyranny masking a soul yearning for freedom. Poirot approached with a gentle bow. "Madame Langford," he said, his voice soft but probing, "there is a matter most delicate. It is said that Monsieur Langford discovered certain correspondences between you and another. Letters, perhaps, that spoke of sentiments not permitted. Is this true?" Beatrice's hands tightened on her shawl, her face paling. "He found letters, yes," she admitted, her cultured tone trembling. "They were from Tom Wilkins, written in moments of weakness. Victor threatened to divorce me, to leave me penniless. But I did not kill him, Monsieur Poirot." Her confession unveiled a hidden motive, fear of destitution perhaps, or a desperate bid to protect her honor. The blood-stained apron, Poirot noted, might be a mark of her attempt to aid her husband, but her calm demeanor post-murder suggested a complexity that warranted further scrutiny. Next, Poirot sought out Reginald Langford, whom he found in the billiard room aimlessly striking balls across the green baize. His lanky frame was tense, his blonde hair disheveled, his blue eyes darting with the agitation of a cornered animal. Reginald's psychology was that of the prodigal son, his entitlement fueled by a hunger for his father's fortune to cover his gambling debt. Herring, perhaps, to shift blame. Harold Grimes, found in the study poring over ledgers, was next. His portly frame seemed to shrink under Poirot's gaze, his florid cheeks glistening with sweat as he adjusted his spectacles. Psychologically, Grimes was an opportunist, his genial facade masking a soul driven by financial revenge. "Monsieur Grimes," Poirot said, "your disputes with Monsieur Langford, they were not merely business, were they? There is talk of forged documents, perhaps, to conceal your losses." Grimes's handkerchief twisted in his hands, his voice strained. "Victor was ruthless, yes, but I'd not kill him. I was at the inn, meeting a supplier. The ledgers are clean. Check them." Yet Poirot's keen eye noted a discrepancy in the accounts, a sum unaccounted for that hinted at embezzlement, or a motive to eliminate Victor before he could expose it. The scrap of fabric in the study, blue and coarse, might point to a hired accomplice, or another of Grimes's deceptions. In the kitchen, Agnes Potter stirred a pot of broth, her rosy cheeks flushed with the heat of the hearth. Her pragmatic soul concealed a potential motive, a family secret, perhaps, that Victor's knowledge threatened to expose. "Madame Potter," Poirot said, "the arsenic in the pantry, it is most curious. A distraction, perhaps, from the true method of murder?" Agnes's eyes narrowed, her hands steady despite the accusation. "The arsenic's for rats, sir, nothing more. Victor wronged my son, dismissed him unjustly, but I'd not stoop to murder." Her denial was firm, yet Poirot noted the unused arsenic as a psychological clue, a deliberate ploy to divert attention from the stabbing's brutality. The tampered clock, advanced by several minutes, suggested a calculated effort to muddle the timeline, further implicating Agnes, or someone protecting her. Poirot's inquiries revealed further inconsistencies. A neighbor's report, relayed by Japp, described a figure fleeing through the garden gate at 5:20, cloaked in the mist. A potential outsider, or a household member staging a deception. Clues, footprints, fabric, blood, were but the surface, while the psychological clues, alibis, behaviors, silences, held the deeper truth. "The web, it unravels slowly," Poirot said to Japp, his voice low. "But the little gray cells, they see the pattern. We are close, mon ami, to the heart of this mystery." The manor, its walls steeped in shadows, seemed to pulse with anticipation, as if awaiting the moment when Poirot's genius would illuminate the darkness. Chapter 7. A Night of Revelations. The storm that raged over Langford Manor on that fateful September evening in 1925 had settled into a relentless dirge, its torrents lashing the ivy-clad walls with a fury that seemed to mirror the turmoil within. The manor, its grand interiors now dimmed by the flickering light of oil lamps, exuded an air of oppressive confinement, as if the very stones conspired to trap the secrets of its inhabitants. The drawing room, where the household had faced Hercule Poirot's probing questions, was now a silent witness to the mounting tension, its heavy velvet drapes drawn tightly against the night. The air was thick with the scent of damp wool and the faint acridity of extinguished candles, a stark contrast to the undercurrent of suspicion that pulsed through the gathered souls. The clock on the mantel, its gilt hands inching toward 10, ticked with a solemnity that underscored the gravity of the hour, each chime a reminder of the truth that drew ever closer. Hercule Poirot, his diminutive figure a beacon of calm amid the chaos, stood in the corridor outside the study, his patent leather shoes gleaming faintly in the lamplight. His egg-shaped head was tilted in thought, his piercing green eyes half closed as his little gray cells wove the threads of evidence into a tapestry of revelation. His impeccable mustaches twitched with the faintest hint of anticipation. a sign that the puzzle was beginning to yield its secrets. Psychologically, Poirot was a master of order, his mind a crucible where the discord of human motives was distilled into clarity. His method was one of precision inquiries, determined to uncover the revelations that the night promised. Poirot's first discovery came in Reginald Langford's bedroom, where a search, conducted with Japp's reluctant approval, yielded a startling clue. A bloodied glove, tucked beneath a pile of shirts in a drawer. The glove, leather and well-worn, bore traces of crimson that matched the blood in the study. Poirot held it aloft, his eyes narrowing. "This glove, it is most suggestive," he said to Japp. "But is it the hand of the killer, or a plant to cast suspicion?" Reginald, summoned to explain, paled at the sight, his sneer replaced by a flicker of panic. "That's not mine," he protested, his voice cracking. "Someone's trying to frame me. Grimes, maybe, or that gardener." His denial was vehement, but his trembling hands betrayed his fear. Psychologically, Reginald was a creature of entitlement, his greed for his father's fortune a motive that burned brightly. The glove, Poirot noted, could be a red herring, planted to implicate the heir, or a damning link to his guilt. The muddy footprint in the study, partially matching his boots, added weight to the suspicion, yet its smudged edges suggested tampering, a deliberate act of misdirection. Next, Poirot sought out Eliza Croft, whose erratic behavior had grown more pronounced since the interrogations. He found her in the scullery, scrubbing pots with a ferocity that bordered on desperation, her sharp features drawn tight with anxiety. Her mousy hair, usually neatly tucked, straggled from her cap, and her dark eyes darted nervously as Poirot approached. Psychologically, Eliza was a pressure cooker of suppressed rage, her years of servitude under Victor's cruel tongue fueling a motive of vengeance. "Mademoiselle Croft," Poirot said, his tone gentle but incisive. "Your alibi, it crumbles. The housemaid places you near the study at 5:20, and the blood smear on the doorframe, it suggests a hasty exit, no?" Eliza's hands froze, the pot slipping into the sink with a clatter. "I sacked my boy unjustly, left him jobless and shamed," she admitted, her voice low. "But I'd not kill for it. The arsenic's for rats, nothing more." Her denial was firm, but Poirot noted the clock's tampering, a deliberate act to muddle the timeline, suggesting calculation rather than impulse. The arsenic, unused but suggestive, was a psychological ploy, a red herring to divert attention from the stabbing's brutality. Poirot's inquiries turned to Beatrice Langford, whom he found in the library, her black shawl draped over her shoulders like a mourner's veil. Her emerald eyes, now red-rimmed, met his with a quiet resolve. "Madame," Poirot said, "your calm after the murder. It is remarkable. Yet before you were anxious. Why this change?" Beatrice's lips trembled, but her voice was steady. "I was trapped in a loveless marriage, Monsieur Poirot. Victor's threats to ruin me were a weight I bore daily. But when I found him dead, I felt free, though I grieve the manner of it." Her candor revealed a motive of liberation, yet her composure suggested either innocence or a cunning performance. The blood-stained apron, Poirot mused, was a mark of her attempt to aid her husband, but its prominence in the village's gossip made it a focal point of suspicion. A conversation with Japp in the study brought further clarity. "The apron, Poirot. It's damning," Japp exclaimed, his lantern casting shadows across the blood-stained blotter. Beatrice is the obvious suspect. Poirot shook his head, his mustaches twitching. Mon ami, the blood, it does not always signify guilt. Observe the patterns of behavior. The calm of Madame Langford, the panic of Monsieur Reginald, the agitation of Mademoiselle Croft. These are the clues that speak loudest. The crumpled letter in Victor's hand, still illegible beneath the blood, hinted at a motive tied to blackmail or betrayal, its author a key to the puzzle. As the clock struck 10, its chimes muffled by the storm, Poirot paced the study, his mind a whirl of connections. The bloodied glove, the tampered howling winds, and lashing rain, transforming the estate into an island of isolation, cut off from the world by both weather and suspicion. Within the manor's ivy-clad walls, the air was thick with tension, as if the very stones absorbed the mounting dread of its inhabitants. The drawing room, where Hercule Poirot had first interrogated the household, now served as a crucible for their fears, its flickering oil lamps casting long shadows that seemed to writhe with accusation. The scent of beeswax and damp wool hung heavy, mingling with the faint tang of fear that emanated from the assembled suspects. The clock on the mantel, its gilt hands nearing 11, ticked with a relentless precision, each chime a harbinger of the revelations that loomed ever closer, like the storm clouds pressing against the manor's windows. Hercule Poirot, his diminutive figure a beacon of calm amid the gathering storm, stood at the room's center, his patent leather shoes gleaming against the Aubusson rug. His egg-shaped head was tilted in contemplation, his piercing green eyes scanning the faces before him with the precision of a watchmaker inspecting a delicate mechanism. His impeccable mustaches twitched faintly, a sign that his little gray cells were nearing a breakthrough. Psychologically, Poirot was a master of order, his mind a symphony of logic and intuition. Each clue, a note in the melody of truth he sought to compose. His method was one of subtle provocation, stirring the emotions of the guilty to reveal their secrets. "Mes amis," he began, his Belgian accent lending a melodic cadence to his words. "The storm outside, it mirrors the storm within this house. The truth, it is close, but it requires us to confront the shadows of your souls. Let us speak plainly, for the hour grows late." Inspector Japp, standing by the fireplace, his ruddy face etched with impatience, gripped his notebook tightly. The weight of the case pressed heavily upon him, and the mounting accusations among the suspects only deepened his frustration. "They're at each other's throat," indignation shot back. "You're one to talk, Grimes. You swindled Victor blind, and he was about to expose you." His weathered hands clenched into fists, his deep brown eyes burning with fury. Psychologically, Tom's passion for Beatrice Langford was a motive that flickered like a flame, while Grimes's financial desperation suggested a colder, calculated intent. Poirot observed silently, his mind cataloging their accusations as psychological clues, each outburst a thread in the web of deceit. Beatrice Langford, her delicate frame swathed in black, sat with her hands folded, her emerald eyes fixed on the floor. Her calm demeanor, so striking in the wake of her husband's death, now seemed to waver under the weight of scrutiny. "Madame Langford," Poirot said, his voice gentle but incisive. "Your silence, it speaks volumes. The letters from Monsieur Wilkins, they were a secret your husband threatened to expose. Did this drive you to act?" Beatrice's lips trembled, but her voice was steady. "I loved my husband once, Monsieur Poirot. But that love died long ago. The letters were a mistake, but I did not kill him. I sought only to help when I found him." Her candor was compelling, yet Poirot noted the psychological shift. Her calm post-murder contrasted with her earlier anxiety, suggesting either innocence or a masterful performance. Reginald Langford slouched in his chair, his blonde hair disheveled, sneered at the accusations flying around him. "You're all barking up the wrong tree," he snapped, his blue eyes darting nervously. "Father was a tyrant, but I was at the pub. Ask the barkeep." His denial was vehement, but the bloodied glove found in his room revealed earlier hung over him like a specter. Psychologically, Reginald was driven by greed, his gambling debts a noose tightening around his future. The muddy footprint in the study, partially matching his boots, remained a damning clue, though its smudged edges suggested tampering. A red herring, perhaps, to shift blame. Poirot's gaze lingered on him, noting the tremor in his hands, a sign of fear rather than innocence. Eliza Croft, her sharp feature, pragmatic soul masking a deeper unease. "Madame Potter," Poirot said, "the tempered clock, the arsenic, these are distractions, oui? But your grudge against Monsieur Langford, it is real. What secret did he hold over you?" Agnes's eyes narrowed, her hands smoothing her apron. "He shamed my son, yes, but I'd not kill for it. The arsenic's for rats, nothing more." Her denial was firm, but the tampered clock, advanced to confuse the timeline, suggested calculation. The arsenic, unused but suggestive, was a psychological ploy, a red herring to divert attention from the stabbing's brutality. Poirot interceded as the accusations reached a fever pitch, his voice cutting through the din like a blade. "Mes amis, enough! The accusations, they are but noise, obscuring the truth. Let us consider the facts. The dagger, its fingerprints smudged deliberately. The timeline, muddled by a tampered clock. The motives, woven into a tapestry of greed, revenge, and love." He paced the room, his steps measured, his mind a whirl of connections. The coroner's report, refined since the initial inquiry, placed Victor's death at precisely 5:18, based on the blood's clotting and body temperature. This invalidated several alibis. Reginald's claim of being at the pub by 5:15 was questionable, as the walk took 10 minutes. Eliza's presence near the study at 5:20 placed her dangerously close to the crime, and Agnes's claim of hearing the scream at 5:22 was impossible, given the clock's tampering. A new revelation emerged as Poirot revisited the crumpled letter in Victor's hand, its blood-stained words partially legible under closer inspection. The letter, written in a feminine hand, hinted at a scandal involving Agnes, a youthful indiscretion that Victor had threatened to expose, perhaps to ruin her family's reputation. "This letter, it is a key," Poirot said to Jap, his voice low. "It speaks of blackmail, of a secret that drove someone to act. The motive, tied to Agnes's shame, added another layer. Evening in 1925 had reached a crescendo, its howling winds and torrential rain transforming the estate into a fortress of isolation, its ivy-clad walls standing resolute against the elements. Within, the air was thick with an almost palpable dread, as if the manor itself sensed the imminent unraveling of its secrets. The study, where Victor Langford had met his brutal end, now served as the stage for the penultimate act of this grim drama, its heavy oak furniture and leather-bound books bearing silent witness to the gathering tension. The oil lamps, their flames flickering in the draught, cast eerie shadows across the blood-stained blotter, where the dagger's hilt still gleamed with a malevolent sheen. The scent of old leather and damp wool mingled with the acrid tang of fear, And the clock on the mantel, its hands nearing midnight, ticked with a solemnity that seemed to herald the approaching denouement. Hercule Poirot, his diminutive figure commanding despite the oppressive atmosphere, stood at the center of the study, his patent leather shoes gleaming against the worn carpet. His egg-shaped head was tilted in contemplation, his piercing green eyes scanning the assembled household with the precision of a hawk surveying its prey. His impeccable mustaches twitched faintly, a sign that his little gray cells were poised on the brink of revelation. Psychologically, Poirot was a beacon of order, his mind a crucible where the chaos of human motives was distilled into clarity, each clue a piece in the intricate puzzle he was about to solve. His method was one of calculated provocation, stirring the guilty to betray themselves through word or gesture. "Mes amis," he began, his Belgian accent lending a melodic cadence to his words. "We stand at the precipice of truth. The clues, they converge. The apron, the footprints, the letter, and the little gray cells, they see the pattern. Let us recreate the scene, and the killer, they shall be revealed." Inspector Japp, his ruddy face etched with anticipation, stood by the door, his notebook clutched tightly. The weight of the case had worn on him, but Poirot's serene confidence bolstered his growing unease. Harold Grimes, his portly figure sweating profusely, adjusted his spectacles nervously, his florid cheeks glistening in the lamplight. Eliza Croft, her sharp features drawn tight, clutched her apron strings, her mousy hair straggling from her cap. Tom Wilkins, his burly frame awkward in the refined setting, stood by the window, his weathered hands clenched. Agnes Potter, her rosy cheeks flushed, hovered near the door, her pragmatic soul masking a flicker of dread. Each bore the weight of suspicion, their alibis frayed, their motives exposed like raw nerves. Poirot began with the physical clues, his voice steady as he paced the room. The apron, stained with Monsieur Langford's blood. It is the talk of the village, oui? Yet, it tells us not of guilt but of aid. Madame Langford, you knelt beside your husband seeking to save him, no? Beatrice nodded, her voice trembling. I thought he might live, Monsieur Poirot. I could not stand by and do nothing. Her candor was compelling, yet Poirot noted her calm post-murder, a psychological clue that suggested either innocence or cunning. The apron, he concluded, was a mark of her attempt to help, not a sign of her guilt. He turned to the footprints, gesturing to the carpet where the muddy tread remained. The footprint, it is heavy, smudged deliberately to obscure its size. It points to the garden, to Monsieur Wilkins perhaps. But the smudging, it is the work of calculation, not haste. Tom's face flushed, his fists tightening. I was in the shed, sir, I swear it. I'd no part in this. His passion was genuine, but Poirot noted the bloodied rag in the shed. A red herring, perhaps, to divert suspicion. Tom's motive, rooted in his unspoken love for Beatrice, remained a possibility, but the footprints tampering suggested another hand. The torn scrap of fabric, blue and coarse, caught on the desk was next. This fabric, it is coarse, of a working man's garb. Yet its placement, it is too convenient, oui? Manipulation. The glove, like the footprint, was a deliberate misdirection, its placement too obvious to be accidental. The crumpled letter in Victor's hand, its words partially legible, revealed a motive tied to blackmail. This letter, it speaks of a scandal, Mademoiselle Potter's youthful indiscretion, perhaps, that Monsieur Langford threatened to expose. Agnes's rosy cheeks paled, her hands trembling. He knew of my past, yes, but I'd not killed to silence him. Her denial was firm, but the tampered clock, advanced to confuse the timeline, suggested calculation. The arsenic in the pantry, unused but suggestive, was another red herring, designed to divert attention from the stabbing's brutality. Poirot's voice rose, commanding the room. The timeline. It is precise. Monsieur Langford died at 5:18 per the coroner. The cry at 5:20, the scream at 5:30, these are fixed. Yet the clock, it was advanced, and the alibis, they crumble. The killer, they act in passion, but cover their tracks with cunning. He paused, his eyes locking onto each suspect in turn. The red herrings, the glove, the arsenic, the fabric, they are distractions. The true clues lie in behavior. The calm of Madame Langford, the panic of Monsieur Reginald, the agitation of Mademoiselle Croft. As accusations flew, Grimes pointing to Tom, Tom to Reginald, Eliza to Agnes, Poirot interceded, his voice cutting through the din. Enough! The motives, they are clear. Greed, revenge, love, shame. But the killer, they betray themselves through their actions. The footprints, doctored. The glove, planted. The letter, a distraction. The truth, it is in the psychology, in the silences. The room fell silent. The suspect's face is a gallery of dread as the clock struck midnight, its chimes echoing like a tolling bell. Poirot stood by the desk, recreating the moment of murder. Picture it. Monsieur Langford, alone, arguing with his killer. A dagger, plunged, was lit by the flickering glow of oil lamps, their light casting long shadows across the blood-stained blotter and the dagger's gleaming hilt. The heavy oak furniture, the leather-bound books, and the worn carpet bore silent witness to the drama unfolding, while the clock on the mantel, its hands past midnight, ticked with a solemnity that heralded the triumph of justice. The air was thick with anticipation, as if the manor itself held its breath, awaiting the unmasking of the killer. Hercule Poirot, his diminutive figure commanding the room, with an air of serene authority, stood at the center, his patent leather shoes gleaming against the carpet's faded weave. His egg-shaped head was tilted slightly, his piercing green eyes sweeping over the assembled household with the precision of a conductor orchestrating a symphony's climax. His impeccable mustaches twitched faintly, a sign that his little gray cells had woven the threads of evidence into a tapestry of truth. Psychologically, Poirot was a paragon of order, his mind a crucible where the chaos of human motives was distilled into clarity, each clue a note in the melody of justice he was about to unveil. "Mes amis," he began, his Belgian accent lending a melodic cadence to his words. "We have journeyed through a labyrinth of deceit, but the little gray cells, they have prevailed. The truth of Monsieur Victor Langford's murder, it is now clear. Let us reveal the killer and bring peace to this troubled house." Inspector Japp, his ruddy face etched with a mixture of fatigue and anticipation, stood by the door, his notebook clutched tightly. The weight of the case had tested his patience, but Poirot's unwavering confidence bolstered his resolve. "You've got them on pins and needles, Poirot," he muttered, his Scots burr softened by hope. "But can you name the killer? The clues are a devil's tangle." Poirot's lips curved into a serene smile. "Mon ami, the tangle, it is but an illusion. The truth, It is simple when viewed with method and clarity. Observe and listen. Apron, stained with Monsieur Langford's blood. It was the talk of Blackthorn Village, oui? Yet it tells us not of guilt, but of compassion. Madame Langford, you knelt beside your husband, seeking to aid him, no? Beatrice nodded, her voice trembling. I could not let him die alone, Monsieur Poirot, though our marriage was broken. Her candor confirmed Poirot's suspicion. The apron was a mark of her innocence, not her guilt, a clue misinterpreted by the village's gossip. He turned to the muddy footprint, gesturing to the carpet. The footprint, heavy and smudged. It points to the garden. To Monsieur Wilkins, perhaps. But the smudging, it is deliberate. A work of calculation to obscure the truth. Tom's face flushed, his fists tightening. I was in the shed, sir, I swear it. I'd no part in this. Poirot nodded, his eyes softening. Oui, Monsieur Wilkins. Your passion for Madame Langford, it is true. But it is not the motive of murder. The bloodied rag in the shed, he concluded, was a red herring, planted to divert suspicion. The torn scrap of fabric, blue and coarse, was next. This fabric, caught on the desk. It suggests a working man's garb, yet its placement is too convenient. A clue staged to mislead. Poirot's gaze swept to Grimes, whose nervous fidgeting intensified. Monsieur Grimes, your disputes with the victim, they were fierce, oui? A forged document, perhaps, to hide your losses. Grimes's voice was strained. I was at the inn, not here. I'd no need to kill him. Poirot noted his shifty demeanor, but the fabric pointed elsewhere, a deliberate misdirection. The bloodied glove found in Reginald's room was a focal point. This glove, it bears the victim's blood, hidden in Monsieur Reginald's drawer. A damning clue, or a plant to accuse the heir. Reginald's sneer collapsed, his blue eyes wide with panic. It's not mine. Someone's framing me, Grimes, or that maid. His fear was palpable, and Poirot noted his eyes locking onto Reginald. Monsieur Reginald, it is you who struck the blow. Driven by greed and debts, you argued with your father at 5 o'clock, your rage spilling into violence. You stabbed him in passion, then fled, planting the glove to implicate another. The footprint, you doctored with mud from your boots, smudging it to obscure the truth. The clock, you advanced to muddle the timeline. Reginald's face drained of color, his sneer replaced by a snarl. You've no proof, Poirot, he shouted, but his trembling hands betrayed him. Poirot continued, relentless. The letter, it was a distraction, planted by you to point to Mademoiselle Potter. The fabric, torn from your own coat in the struggle, you left to suggest a stranger. But your panic, your behavior, it betrays you. The little gray cells, they see the pattern. The room fell silent, the suspects' faces frozen in shock, as Reginald's defiance crumbled. He deserved it, the tyrant, he spat, collapsing into his chair, his confession torn from him under Poirot's unyielding gaze. Poirot turned to Jap, his voice calm. Mon ami, the case, it is solved. The killer, he acted in rage but covered his tracks with cunning. Justice, it is served. The household exhaled, the tension breaking like the storm outside. Beatrice's eyes filled with tears, not for her husband, but for the son she had lost to greed. Tom's shoulders sagged, his passion for Beatrice now a bittersweet memory. Grimes, Eliza, and Agnes exchanged glances, their secrets exposed but their innocence affirmed. As the clock struck 1, its chimes soft in the waning storm, Poirot adjusted his coat, his mustaches twitching with satisfaction. "Dear listener," he said, as if addressing an unseen audience, "thus concludes our tale. The little gray cells, they triumph over deceit. Until next time, keep your own gray cells alert. Farewell." The manor, free